Sweden. A farmhouse kitchen. Long past midnight. The bake oven has been burning for hours, and nobody is baking bread. Beside the oven stands a cradle. Inside the cradle, a child. And standing over them both, a mother who has become convinced of something impossible, that the child in the cradle is not her child, that her real baby was carried into the hill weeks ago, that the thing left behind only wears her son's face. Her neighbours agree with her. The wise woman from down the valley, she agrees with her too. Even the stories her own grandmother told her agree. And those stories explain, in precise detail, exactly what she must do next. What happened beside ovens like this one did not stay in folklore. It ended up in courtrooms, in sworn testimony, in verdicts, real trials of real parents over children accused of being something else, because this legend came with instructions. And for hundreds of years, across Scandinavia and beyond, people followed them. This is the story of the bortbyting, the changeling of the North, and of what happens when a myth is believed so completely that the law itself is forced to answer it. The word is Swedish, bortbyting, literally, the one who is exchanged away, not stolen, not lost, traded, swapped in the dark, one life for another. To understand the fear, you have to understand the world it grew in. Scandinavia, before electric light, farms scattered across valleys, separated by forest, by mountain, by weeks of winter darkness. And in that darkness, people knew, lived the others, the trolls of the mountains, the huldrefolk of the forest. In Sweden, they were often simply called the underjordiska, the ones under the earth. They were not devils exactly. They were a parallel people, older than the church, living inside the hills, keeping cattle, holding weddings, raising families, almost human, but not. And there was one thing, the tradition insisted, that the underground people wanted more than anything else: human children. Some said troll blood grew thin and their line needed renewing. Some said a human child was a treasure, a status symbol, a pet. And some said the trolls simply knew their own offspring were ugly and coveted ours. Whatever the reason, the belief was the same. From Iceland to the Danish islands, if your child was left unguarded, even for a moment, it could be taken, and something else would be left in the cradle. The danger had a season, not summer or winter, a season in the life of the child, the days between birth and baptism. An unbaptized infant belonged to no one, not yet claimed by God, not yet written into the parish book. It existed in a doorway between worlds. And doorways, in folklore, are where things come through. When Christianity arrived in the North, it didn't kill the old beliefs. It deputized them. The trolls became agents of the devil, and the changeling became proof of what happened to families who were careless, with a soul. Even the great reformers believed it. In the 1530s, Martin Luther himself examined a disabled boy in the German town of Dessau and declared him a Wechselbalg, a changeling, a mass of flesh with no soul inside. Luther's recommendation, recorded in his table talk, was simple. The child should be drowned. This was not a whispered peasant superstition. This was doctrine, endorsed at the highest levels of European thought. And in the North, it was about to become something like law. So how did you know? How did a parent become convinced that the baby in the cradle was no longer theirs? The tales are strangely consistent about the signs. The child changes, A happy infant becomes a screaming one. It cries, the Norwegians said, like something possessed. Worst of all, at its own baptism, it eats. That detail appears everywhere, in every country. The changeling eats and is never satisfied, draining a poor household like a leech. And yet, it never grows. It doesn't walk. It doesn't speak. Its head seems too large for its body. And its face. Witnesses always came back to the face. Its face looks old. An ancient little man, they said, staring out of a baby's cradle. Read that list again with modern eyes, and something becomes uncomfortably clear. A child who doesn't grow, doesn't speak, cries constantly, doesn't meet your gaze. We will come back to that, because the people of the time drew a different conclusion. And once the suspicion took root, everything the child did became evidence. Prevention came first. Every Nordic household knew the safeguards, passed from mother to daughter, like recipes. Steel in the cradle, a pair of scissors laid open across the blanket, a knife in the doorframe, a needle sewn into the swaddling. The old folk could not abide steel. Fire kept burning in the birth room every hour of every night until the christening. And the water the newborn was washed in could not be thrown out after dark, or luck went with it. A hymnal placed in the cradle, the sign of the cross, made over the child and under it. And above all, the one rule that mattered: never, ever leave the baby alone. But farms demanded labour. Mothers had to milk, to carry water, to tend the fire. And the tales all begin the same way. She was gone. Only a moment. A shape slips from the forest edge. A bundle is lifted. Another is laid down. And in a Swedish story, from Södermanland, a traveller resting by a stone actually sees it happen. A troll woman swapping one sleeping infant for another. Calm as a housewife. Changing loaves. When the mother returns, the cradle is still occupied. The blanket is still warm. And it takes days, sometimes weeks, before she says out loud what she has started to believe. And here, the legend turns from eerie to monstrous, because the folklore of the bortbyting did not stop at diagnosis. It prescribed a cure. The logic was brutally elegant. Somewhere under the hill, a troll mother was raising your child. If you made her child suffer, she would hear it, and she would come back to trade. Cruelty, in other words, was not a sin. Cruelty was a summons. In the parish of Bettna, in Sweden, a tale collected in the 19th century lays out the method like a recipe. The wise woman tells the mother, heat the bake oven 3 Thursday evenings in a row. Place the changeling on the bread peel and pretend you are about to throw it into the fire. 3 times, the story says. She did it. And on the 3rd Thursday, a terrified troll woman burst through the door with a stolen boy in her arms, screaming, "Give me back my child and take yours." Why Thursday? Thursday was the old day. Thor's day, when the underground folk held power and when they could be reached. 3 Thursdays in a row appears in ritual after ritual, like a dosage. The oven was only one tool. In Norway, the prescription was birch. Beat the changeling with a switch. 3 Thursday nights running, and its true mother would not endure it. Elsewhere, leave it on the dunghill overnight. Starve it. Set it on the shore, at the tide line. Every version rests on the same bet, that a troll loves its child more than you might love the thing in your cradle. There were gentler tricks. And they are the ones the storybooks like to remember. If a changeling could be startled into speaking, it would betray its true age, and the spell would break. So in Denmark, a mother brews beer in 7 eggshells, ranged solemnly on the hearth, and the creature in the cradle sits up, stares, and croaks. I have seen the forest of Rold grow up and be cut down 3 times, but never have I seen anyone brew in an eggshell, an infant with centuries behind its eyes. The mask slips, the trolls take their own back, and the story ends in laughter and relief. But listen to what these stories actually are. They are not entertainment. They are instruction manuals, sorted by severity. Start with the eggshells, escalate to the birch, and if all else fails, heat the oven. And folklore in the north was not a book on a shelf. It was the operating system of rural life. How you planted, how you buried, how you judged your neighbors. So the question was never whether someone would follow the instructions. The question was, how many times, and whether anyone would ever be held to account for it. The answer to that second question sits in court records, because eventually the changeling belief collided with the one institution required to write everything down. Telemark, Norway. Around the year 1720, a daughter is born to a man named Jesper Beckus, and the local record is unsparing about what happened next. The girl was named Aslug. She was, the account says, so unusual in appearance that the parish quietly agreed she could not be a human child. She was a changeling. Everyone said so. So her own mother did what the tradition demanded. On Thursday evenings, she whipped the girl and left her lying on the manure pile in the cold, waiting for the trolls to come and make the trade. The trolls never came. No exchange ever happened, because there was nothing to exchange. Aslug was simply a little girl. She survived. She grew up, and she lived her entire life in that valley, carrying the name of Changeling. Aslug's story was written down as a family memory, but other cases ended in places where memory becomes evidence, before a judge. In Sweden, the folklore records preserve the case of a mother who carried the oven ritual to its end. Not the threat, the act. The child died in the fire, and the woman was taken to court for it. Think about what that courtroom had to do. The law said, a child is dead by its mother's hand. The mother, and much of her community, said no child had died at all. Only a troll had been sent home. How do you sentence someone for murdering a creature the whole village agrees was never human? That question sounds medieval, and yet the records suggest Swedish authorities were still meeting versions of this belief within living memory of the Second World War. And Scandinavia was not alone. The same belief, under a different name, was producing the same trials at the other edge of Europe, in Ireland, where the fairies played the troll's part. County Kerry, 1826. A woman named Anne Roche is charged with murder. The victim, Michael Lee, 4 years old, unable to speak or stand. Roche had bathed the boy 3 times in the River Flesk. Not to clean him, she testified, but to force the fairy out of him. And on the 3rd immersion, Michael drowned. The jury heard the evidence. They heard that the killing was a ritual performed in earnest on a disabled child, and they acquitted her. Not guilty. The belief itself stood in that courtroom like a second defendant, and it walked free. 69 years later, came the case that horrified the newspapers of 2 continents, because this time, the changeling was a grown woman. Ballivadlia, Ireland, 1895. Bridget Cleary, 26 years old. Sharp, independent, a dressmaker, with her own money. She catches a chill and takes to her bed. Within days, her husband Michael has stopped seeing his wife in that bed. The woman is too tall, he says, too fine. And the neighbours murmur, the old diagnosis. The real Bridget has been taken. And this is a changeling. What follows is a week of ritual. She's doused with herbs, held over the hearth, interrogated by candlelight. Say your name. Say it 3 times, while relatives crowd the doorway of the small stone house. On the final night, Michael Cleary throws lamp oil on his wife and burns her. And then he waits for days at a fairy fort, expecting the real Bridget to ride out of it on a white horse. This time, there was a conviction, but the charge tells you everything. Not murder, manslaughter. The court accepted that Michael Cleary believed, truly believed, that the thing he burned was not his wife. 15 years for burning a woman alive. The last changeling verdict of the 19th century, delivered while electric trams were running in Dublin. Folklore had entered the courtroom and bargained the crime down. Which forces the real question, the one this whole legend has been hiding. What was the changeling actually for? Line up the signs again. A child who does not grow, does not speak, does not walk, eats without thriving, screams without cause, an old knowing face on an infant body. Modern clinicians read that list without hesitation. Down syndrome, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, progeria, which quite literally gives a child an aged face, PKU, autism, failure to thrive, conditions that had no names. In a Norwegian valley in 1720. But the change they brought, a healthy baby who month by month becomes a child the parents no longer recognize, that needed a name, and the name was bortbyting. The psychologist Stuart Weiss put it plainly: when children fail to meet expectations, parents find a demon to blame. The changeling was that demon, ready-made. And notice what the legend does for the family. It says, this is not your child, not your blood, not your sin, not your fault. Your real, perfect baby is alive, elsewhere. It is grief, converted into hope. That may be the most disturbing thing about the bortbyting. It wasn't believed because people were stupid. It was believed because it was merciful to everyone, except the child in the cradle. There is a darker economic reading too. A subsistence farm had a fixed ration of food and labour, and a child who would never work was a mouth that never closed. The legend provided something no family could otherwise obtain: permission to neglect, permission to abandon, and in the last resort, as the court records show, permission to kill, with the community's blessing, because what died was officially not a child. Some historians go further. They suggest the ritual sometimes worked in the cruelest possible way. Neighbours, alarmed by the abuse, might quietly intervene. A child, left at the church door, came back exchanged. The system laundered its own violence. And yet, the tradition knew. Somewhere, it knew. Because Scandinavian folklore preserves a second kind of changeling story. And it argues with the first. In a beloved Swedish tale, a mother is told to beat the troll child, and she refuses. She raises it gently as her own, through mockery and hardship. And it is precisely that mercy that breaks the spell and brings her son home. When the trolls return her boy, he tells her, "Every kindness you showed the changeling, they show me, under the hill, and every cruelty would have fallen on me." Selma Lagerlöf, the first woman ever to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, retold that version in 1915 as a quiet Swedish rebuke to 2 centuries of ovens and birch rods. Folklore correcting itself a generation too late. The trials ended. The belief retreated. From the courtroom, then from the parish, then from the farmhouse. Surviving mainly in the pages where folklorists like Landstad and Hofberg had pinned it like a specimen. But the changeling never really left. It slid sideways into art. John Bauer painted Sweden's trolls into national memory. Huge, mossy, sorrowful things cradling golden-haired children in the dark of the forest. It lives on in fantasy novels, in horror films about wrong children, in video games and folk metal ballads. Every story about a family member who is suddenly, subtly not themselves, is carrying changeling blood. And in our own century, the legend took one more turn, perhaps the strangest of all. Autistic adults began adopting the changeling as their own, not as an insult, but as a mirror. The experience, they write, of growing up feeling swapped into the wrong world, performing humanity from a script everyone else was born knowing. The monster of the story, reclaiming the story, because the bortbyting was never really about trolls. Strip the legend to its skeleton, and what remains is a question every parent has faced at 3 a.m, standing over a crying child they suddenly cannot comfort. Do I truly know this person? The legend took the most frightening answer, no, and built a door in the hillside to explain it. The trolls are gone. The diagnosis has replaced the wise woman, and the oven is just an oven. But the fear the bortbyting fed on, the fear of the stranger inside someone we love, has never needed folklore to survive. Somewhere in a Norwegian churchyard lies Aslug, daughter of Jesper Beckus, a woman who spent 80 years being told she was not human because she was born with the wrong face in the wrong century. The courts that judged her neighbours' beliefs are dust. The stories that condemned her are children's books now, with beautiful illustrations. But late at night, by the last light of a fire, a mother still leans over a cradle and studies a small sleeping face. And somewhere at the bottom of the oldest part of her mind, something asks, is it mine? The bortbyting only ever needed that one question. It still has it